Chapter 6 0 to 1 by Peter Thiel. You are not a lottery ticket. The most contentious question in business is whether success comes from luck or skill. What do successful people say? Malcolm Gladwell, a successful author who writes about successful people, declares in Outliers that success results from a patchwork of lucky breaks and arbitrary advantages. Warren Buffett famously considers himself a member of the Lucky Sperm Club and a winner of the Ovarian Lottery. Jeff Bezos attributes Amazon's success to an incredible planetary alignment and jokes that it was half luck, half good timing, and the rest brains. Bill Gates even goes so far as to claim that he was lucky to be born with certain skills, though it's not clear whether that's actually possible. Perhaps these guys are being strategically humble. However, the phenomenon of serial entrepreneurship would seem to call into question our tendency to experience success as the product of chance. Hundreds of people have started multiple multi-million multi-million dollar business. A few like Steve Jobs, Jack Dorsey, and Elon Musk have created several multi-billion dollar companies. If success were mostly a matter of luck, these kinds of serial entrepreneurs probably wouldn't exist. In January 2013, Jack Dorsey, founder of Twitter and Square, tweeted to his 2 million followers, "Success is never accidental." Most of the replies were unambiguously negative. Referencing the tweet in the Atlantic, reporter Alexis Madrigal wrote that his instinct was to reply, "Success is never accidental." Said all multimillionaire white men, it's true that already successful people have an easier time doing new things, whether due to their networks, wealth, or experience. But perhaps we have become too quick to dismiss anyone who claims to have succeeded according to plan. Is there a way to settle this debate objectively? Unfortunately not, because companies are not experiments. To get a scientific answer about Facebook, for example, we did have to rewind to 2004, create 1,000 copies of the word and start Facebook in each copy to see how many times it would succeed. But that experiment is impossible. Every company starts in unique circumstances and every company starts only once. Statistics doesn't work when the sample size is one. From the Renaissance and the Enlightenment to the mid 20th century, luck was something to be mastered, dominated, and controlled. Everyone agreed that you should do what you could, not focus on what you couldn't. Ralph Waldo Emerson captured this ethos when he wrote, "Shallow men believe in luck, believe in circumstances. Strong men believe in cause and effect." In 1912, after he became the first explorer to reach the South Pole, Ronald Emerson wrote, "A victory awaits him who was everything in order luck." In luck, people call it. No one pretended that misfortune didn't exist, but prior generations believed in making their own luck by working hard. If you believe your life is mainly a matter of chance, why read this book? Learning about startups is worthless if you are just reading stories about people who won the lottery. Slot machines for dummies can purport to tell you which kind of rabbits food to rub or how to tell which machines are hot, but it can't tell you how to win. Did Bill Gates simply win the intelligence lottery? Was Sheryl Sandberg born with a silver spoon, or did she lean in? When we debate historical questions like these, luck is in the past tense. Far more important are questions about the future. Is it a matter of chance or design? Can you control your future? You can expect the future to take a definite form, or you can treat it as hazily uncertain. If you treat the future as something definite, it makes sense to understand it is advanced and to work to shape it. But if you expect an indefinite future ruled by randomness, you will give up on trying to master it. Indefinite attitudes to the future explain what's most dysfunctional in our world today. Process trumps substance. When people lack concrete plans to carry out, they use formal rules to assemble a portfolio of various options. This describes Americans today. In middle school, we are encouraged to start hoarding extracurricular activities. In high school, ambitious students compete even harder to appear omnicompetent. By the time a student gets to college, he's spent a decade curating a bewilderingly diverse resume to prepare a completely unknowable future. Come what may, he is ready for nothing in particular. A definite view, by contrast, favors firm's convictions. Instead of pursuing many-sided mediocrity and calling it well-roundedness, a definite person determines the one best thing to do and then does it. Instead of working tirelessly to make herself indistinguishable, she strives to be great at something substantive, to be a monopoly of one. This is not what young people do today, because everyone around them has long since lost faith in a definite world. No one gets into Stanford by excelling at just one thing, unless that thing happens to involve throwing or catching a leather ball. Definite, indefinite. There is a four quadruped design. Above definite and indefinite, and left side optimistic, pessimistic. In one first column, US 1950s, 1960s, it defined definite and optimistic. In US 1982 present, indefinite and optimistic. Pessimistic and definite comes in third column. This is China present, and fourth column, indefinite, Europe present. You can also expect the future to be either better or worse than the present. Optimists welcome the future, pessimists fear it. Combining these possibilities, yield four views. Indefinite pessimism. Every culture has a myth of decline from some golden age, and almost all people throughout history have been pessimists. Even today, pessimism still dominates huge parts of the world. An indefinite pessimist looks out onto a big, bleak future, but he has no idea what to do about it. This describes Europe since the early 1970s, when the continent succumbed to undirected bureaucratic drift. Today, the whole Eurozone is in slow motion crisis and nobody is in charge. The European Central Bank doesn't stand for anything but improvisation. The US Treasury prints in God we trust on the dollar. The ECB might as well print kick the can down the road on the euro. Europeans just react to events as they happen and hope things don't get worse. The indefinite pessimist can't know whether the inevitable decline will be fast or slow, catastrophic or gradual. All he can do is wait for it to happen. So he might as well eat, drink, and be merry in the meantime. Hence Europe's famous vacation mania. Definite pessimism. A definite pessimist believes the future can be none, but since it will be bleak, he must prepare for it. Perhaps surprisingly, China is probably the most definitely pessimistic place in the world. When Americans see the Chinese economy grow ferociously fast, 10% per year since 2000, we imagine a confident country mastering its future. But that's because Americans are still optimists and we project our optimism onto China. From China's viewpoint, economic growth cannot come fast enough. Every other country is afraid that China is going to take over the world. China is the only country afraid that it won't. China can go so far only because its starting base is so low. The easiest way for China to grow is to relentlessly copy what has already worked in the West. And that's exactly what it's doing. Executing definite plans by burning ever more coal to build ever more factories and skyscrapers. But with a huge population pushing resource prices higher, there's no way Chinese living standard can ever actually catch up to those of the richest countries, and the Chinese know it. This is why the Chinese leadership is obsessed with the way in which things threaten to get worse. Every senior Chinese leader experienced famine as a child. So when the Politburo looks to the future, disaster is not an abstraction. The Chinese public too knows that winter is coming. Outsiders are fascinated by the great fortunes being made inside China, but they pay less attention to the wealthy Chinese trying hard to get their money out of the country. Poorer Chinese just save everything they can and hope it will be enough. Every class of pupil in China takes the future deadly seriously. Definite optimism. To a definite optimist, the future will be better than the present if he plans and works to make it better. From the 17th century through the 1950s and 60s, definite optimists led the Western world. Scientists, engineers, doctors, and businessmen made the world richer, healthier, and more long lived than previously imaginable, as Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels saw clearly. The 19th century business class created more massive and more colossal productive forces than all preceding generations together. Subjection of nature's forces to man, machinery, application of chemistry to industry and agriculture, steam navigation, railways, electric telegraphs, clearing of whole continents for cultivation, canalization of rivers, whole populations conjured out of ground. What earlier century had even a presentiment that such productive forces slumbered in the lap of social labor. Each generation's inventors and visionaries surpassed their predecessors. In 1843, the London public was invited to make its first crossing underneath the river Thames by a newly dug tunnel. In 1869, the Suez Canal saved Eurasian shipping traffic from rounding the Cape of Good Hope. In 1914, the Panama Canal cut short the route from Atlantic to Pacific. Even the Great Depression failed to impede relentless progress in the United States, which has always been home to the world's most far-seeing definite optimists. The Empire State Building was started in 1929 and finished in 1931. The Golden Gate Bridge was started in 1933 and completed in 1937. The Manhattan Project was started in 1941 and had already produced the world's first nuclear bomb by 1945. Americans continued to remake the face of the world in peacetime. The interstate highway system began construction in 1956 and the first 20,000 miles of road were open for driving by 1965. Definite planning even went beyond the surface of this planet. NASA's Apollo program began in 1961 and put 12 men on the moon before it finished in 1972. Bold plans were not reserved just for political leaders or government scientists. In the late 1940s, a Californian named John Weaver set out to reinvent the physical geography of whole San Francisco Bay Area. Weaver was a school teacher, an amateur theater producer, and a self-taught engineer. Undaunted by his lack of credentials, he publicly proposed to build two huge dams in the bay, construct massive fresh water lakes for drinking water and irrigation, and reclaim 20,000 acres of land for development. Even though he had no personal authority, people took the Weaver plan seriously. It was endorsed by newspaper editorial boards across California. The U.S. Congress had hearing on its feasibility. The Army Corps of Engineers even constructed a 1.5-acre scale model of the bay in a cavernous Sausalito warehouse to simulate it. These tests revealed technical shortcomings, so the plan was not executed. But would anybody today take such a vision seriously in the first place? In the 1950s, people welcomed big plans and asked whether they would work. Today, a grand plan coming from a school teacher would be dismissed as crankery, and a long range vision coming from anyone more powerful would be derided as hubris. You can still visit the Bay model in that Sausalito warehouse, but today it's just a tourist attraction. Big plans for the future have become archaic curiosities. Here is a diagram. Proposed barriers in San Francisco by River Plan. In 1950s, Americans thought big plans for future were too important to be left to experts. Indefinite optimism. After a brief pessimistic phase in the 1970s, Indefinite optimism has dominated American thinking or even ever since 1982, when a long bull market began and finance eclipsed engineering as the way to approach the future. To an indefinite optimist, the future will be better, but he doesn't know how exactly, so he won't make any specific plans. He expects to profit from the future, but sees no reason to design it concretely. Instead of working for years to build a new project, indefinite optimists rearrange already invented ones. Bankers make money by rearranging the capital structures of already existing companies. Lawyers resolve disputes over old things or help other people restructure their affairs. And private equity investors and management consultants don't start new business. They squeeze extra efficiency from old ones with incessant procedural optimizations. It's no surprise that these fields all attract disproportionate numbers of high achieving Ivy League optionality chasers. What could be a more appropriate reward for 2 decades of resume building than a seemingly elite process oriented career that promises to keep options open? Recent graduates' parents often cheer them on the established path. The strange story history of baby boom produced a generation of indefinite optimists so used to effortless progress that they feel entitled to it. Whether you were born in 1945 or 1950 or 1955, things got better every year for the first 18 years of your life, and it had nothing to do with you. Technological advance seemed to accelerate automatically, so the boomers grew up with great expectations but few specific plans for how to fulfill them. Then, when technological progress stalled in the 1970s, increasing income inequality came to the rescue of the most elite boomers. Every year of adulthood continued to get automatically better and better for the rich and successful. The rest of their generation was left behind. But the wealthy boomers who shape public opinion today see little reason to question their naive optimism. Since contract carriers worked for them, they can't imagine that they won't work for their kids too. Malcolm Gladwell says you can't understand Bill Gates' success without understanding his fortunate personal context. He grew up in a good family, went to private school equipped with a computer lab, and counted Paul Allen as a childhood friend. But perhaps you can't understand Malcolm Gladwell without understanding his historical context as a boomer, born in 1963. When baby boomers grow up and write books to explain why one or another individual is successful, they point to the power of a particular individual's context as determined by chance. But they miss the even bigger social context for their own preferred explanations. A whole generation learned from childhood to overrate the power of chance and underrate the importance of planning. Gladwell at first appears to be making a contrarian critic of the myth of the self-made businessman, but actually his own account encapsulates the conventional view of generations. Our indefinitely optimistic world, indefinite finance. While a definitely While a definitely optimistic future would need engineers to design underwater cities and settlements in space, as indefinitely optimistic future calls for more bankers and lawyers. Finance epitomizes indefinite thinking because it's the only way to make money when you have no idea how to create wealth. If they don't go to law school, bright college graduates head to Wall Street precisely because they have no real plan for their career. And once they arrive at Goldman, they find that even inside finance, everything is indefinite. It's still optimistic. You won't play in the markets if you expect it to lose. But the fundamental tenets is that markets is random. You can't know anything specific or substantive. Diversification becomes supreme important. The indefiniteness of finance can be bizarre. Think about what happened when successful entrepreneurs sell their company. What do they do with the money? In a financialized world, it unfolds like this. The founders don't know what to do with it, so they give it to a large bank. The bankers don't know what to do it, so they diversify by spreading it across a portfolio of institutional investors. Institutional investors don't know what to do with their managed capital, so they diversify by amassing a portfolio of stocks. Companies try to increase their share price by generating free cash flows. If they issue dividends or buy back shares and the cycle repeats. At no point does anyone in the chain know what to do with money in the real economy. But in an indefinite world, people actually prefer unlimited optionalities. Money is more valuable than anything you could possibly do with it. Only in a definite future is money a means to an end, not the end itself. Indefinite politics. Politicians have always been officially accountable to the public at election time, but today they are attuned to what the public thinks at every moment. Modern polling enables politicians to tailor their image to match pre-existing public opinion exactly. So for the most part, they do. Nate Silver's election predictions are remarkably accurate, but even more remarkable is how big a story they become every 4 years. We are more fascinated today by statistical predictions of what the country will be thinking in a few weeks' time than by visionary predictions of what the country will look like 10 or 20 years from now. And it's not just the electoral process. The very character of government has become indefinite too. The government used to be able to coordinate complex situations to problems like atomic weaponry and lunar exploration. But today, after 40 years of indefinite creep, the government mainly just provides insurance. Our solutions to big problems are Medicare, Social Security, and a dizzying array of other transfer uh, payment programs. It's no surprise that entitlement spending has eclipsed discretionary spending every year since 1975. To increase in discretionary spending, we did need definite plans to solve specific problems, but according to the indefinite logic of entitlement spending, we can make things better just by sending our out more checks. Thank you very